Hello, everybody. Welcome to Friday, and we're back with another Wow Ergonomics. It's me, Graham Coath, and Stephen Howe, and
Hello.
100 Pokemon, or that's what it feels like in our house today, because it is my 10-year-old's 10th birthday, and he's received 3 more Pokemon today. Got to catch them all, Stephen.
You almost said you almost said your 10th son's birthday, and I was thinking,
Yeah.
I know you're halfway there because you've got 5, but I didn't realise
Like Bon Jovi.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't realise the Coath clan had stretched to 10 offspring, but just the 5.
Well, it might one day with grandchildren. Who knows? You never know. One day. Well, the oldest one is old enough now to
yes,
partake in that if he really wants to. How's your week been?
Yeah, it's been a good week actually, and I'm really pleased about today's guest because I got to be on the other side of it on Monday this week, where I did a live podcast with our guest from today. So it's been a really good week, really interesting to be on the other side of it all. And I won't say too much because we've got lots to talk about. But yes, I'm looking forward to the roles being reversed with today's guests.
Okay, well, as you know today's guest, and I've only just met them in the green room, perhaps you'd like to introduce them.
Well, I'm going to introduce her very quickly, and it's Victoria Whitehouse, and I will let her talk all about herself as well. She can introduce herself better than I can, I'm sure. So,
hi, thank you so much, Graham and Stephen. It was a really, it was wonderful having you on our Q&A on Monday. But I'm Victoria Whitehouse, and I'm operations manager at Hub4. We've spent over 30 years helping organisations meet DSE regulations. But more importantly, look after people who are working at computers, whether that's office, home or hybrid. And we run regular online events that can help support your DSE users. And we also offer a wealth of free online resources you can use as well. So if you've got the time and resource to manage that yourself internally, that's great. But our core message is really that we provide DSE training and assessment to save significant amounts of assessor and admin time, and we believe that DSE isn't just a red tape, that it's actually a really low cost solution for improving wellbeing and performance. So
now Stephen knows what I'm going to say right now, which is that whenever we use an acronym on this show, we do explain it just because there are still, could you believe it, after 30 years, and I've been in the game for over 30 years, there are still people that don't know what DSE is.
Okay, yeah, so DSE stands for display screen equipment. So that is all your equipment that is associated with using the computer. So your computer, your desk, your chair, your laptop riser, and it also encompasses things like your environment. And DSE regulations are a mandatory set of legislation to look after people who work at computers. And that encompasses so much more than just the equipment. But when we refer to DSE, we are talking about display screen equipment.
I still find it such an old-fashioned term. I'm sorry, I really do. The thing is, it really suited when it first came out. Okay, because Victoria, I'm guessing that you're not old enough to remember when all of this first came out. But the thing is that displays back then, they, for a start, were huge. A lot of them. A lot of them were green or orange.
Yeah, green screens.
And had a little flashing cursor, and didn't do very much really. So it's changed drastically. Even in the time that you've been involved with the business, have you seen a lot of change in terms of what people are, or how people are using equipment?
How people are using equipment. I think that things could be a lot further on. I actually think that there's a lot of equipment and a lot of ways of working that probably could be introduced. But now, especially with wireless, that's huge. We updated all our imagery for our courses a few years ago because we were like, wait, no one has a cord on their keyboard or mouse anymore. And screens are flat, then they're not boxy, so everything's kind of been condensed. Like there's less obstructions. People aren't using paperwork as much anymore either. A lot of companies are opting for like paperless environments. So yeah, there are a few things that I feel like have changed as things have gone on. But I suppose Stephen might have a kind of more robust understanding, because he works with more progressive sort of equipment, like the central mice you were showing us. And there are lots of different things available that are maybe a little bit more advanced than what we see at regular workstations.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a couple of things you picked up on there. I think firstly is the actual screen itself. I mean, Graham, I think you were referring to the old days with the old CRT monitors that went back about 2 or 3 foot back into the corner of the desk. I still think there's a lot more. There's been a lot of change in that, and I think curved screens is definitely something that's come in. But I do think we'll start seeing more of that. I think there's probably maybe an IT refresh that, funny enough, I was sort of slightly sidetracking there. I was at an event yesterday and we were talking about the refreshing of equipment, and our old friend COVID got mentioned. And the reason it got mentioned, the context it was mentioned is that a lot of people changed IT equipment very early in COVID when people had to work from home. So what they were talking about, certainly in the IT sector, was the next wave. The refresh of all that COVID type equipment is going to come along. So I think what we will see is a lot of change over the next 12 to 18 months as that COVID refresh or post-COVID refresh starts to hit. So I still think there's people maybe hanging on to equipment that they maybe bought during COVID, and therefore that's now maybe due a change. So that potentially is the lighter laptops, that is more curved screens, that is more 2 and 3 screen type setups. I think that's the thing that's coming. And they say it's interesting. I'd never really thought about it, but those guys in the IT sector who see that refresh were saying, actually, it's coming now. We're in that sort of period. So I think there'll be a lot of equipment updated rest of this year and next year as they change from COVID into the sort of post-COVID refresh, which will be interesting to see what happens. As you say, Victoria, things like central mice that we've discussed on this show before, things like curved screens, I think they're going to continue to be popular and certainly grow in their popularity over the next, as I say, 12, 18, 24 months.
Yeah, I do feel like a lot of changes have been to do with lifestyle as well. I feel like there is much more of a focus on people living healthy lifestyles and realizing that you're not actually meant to be statically sat in front of a screen for hours on hours a day. I feel like people are investing in their own health, whether that's through supplements or getting the 10K steps in or making sure that their resistance training. People are a lot more focused on looking after their health and longevity. And I feel like people are actually spending a lot of money on their own personal health journeys. I just invested in a walking pad so I can do things that are a little bit more methodical while I'm walking. And it doesn't necessarily work if I'm doing a complex task, but if it's something that's repetitive that I need to get done, I'll just be walking at the same time. And I think those sorts of lifestyle changes are a lot more prevalent now. People do care about looking after themselves a lot more.
Now, I was going to ask about that because that follows on nicely, because one of the things you were talking about there fits into something that we talk about called cross-platform workflow, or as Apple like to call it, handoff, which is that these days, because of cloud technology, a lot of people will start a piece of work somewhere, like on a desktop, and then they transition to a phone, and then they might transition to a laptop, and they just continue with that piece of work because that piece of work exists up there somewhere, and they're just accessing that piece of work. Do we feel like DSE regs and whatever have actually kept up with that? Because to me, still a lot of the regs are sort of sat around you and your environment in an environment. But do you feel it's kept up with that kind of different type of workflow?
Yeah, I mean, our training that we provide covers kind of like portable equipment, so like your tablets and things like that. And realistically, if you're working on a screen of any sort for more than an hour, you need to put the proper things in place to make sure that your neck isn't tilted down. You can't be looking down at a phone doing your work for, like really more than 20 minutes. It's going to start like causing issues at that point. So I mean, there are a lot of like portable pieces of equipment that you can get, like the laptop risers and things like that. I really do think it's about education, because a lot of people are happy taking their laptop to a cafe and just sitting on a hard chair and a low table and hunching over and just sitting there for hours. And I don't think people are really aware that that actually does have a cumulative impact over time. It's fine to do that every now and again, but if that's like a habitual way of working, that's a problem. So we do need to offset that a bit by putting things in place to making sure that we're using our portable devices properly. So yeah, I think there could be more done, but I think it's probably around framing the context of why it's important to make those changes.
I mean, I actually spoke to an organisation the other day who was saying that they now need to educate their workers on not looking at the ground, so to speak, when they're walking along the road. In a way, that's all part and parcel of the same health and safety piece as how you should be sitting at a desk, right? Because if we're working like that, and we leave the building and we, walk straight out in front of the taxi that's come to pick us up. That's as much of a perhaps more of a danger than if we're sat at the desk. So there's kind of there's almost like a dichotomy going on there as we talk about more sort of flexible working and people perhaps moving away from the desk and getting that kind of rest period away from the desk. Unless we actually get into people not working, but continuing to do their work just somewhere else, the danger perhaps just sort of moves with them around wherever it is that they are.
No, you do make a really good point. And I think that, making sure that we're taking like regular plan and also planned breaks throughout the day is super important. It's actually going to improve productivity, and it sounds counterintuitive that you think taking breaks is going to make you more productive, but studies show that it does. And I can send you some studies afterwards, because I say on Monday I can't reference studies off the top of my head, but I do send a follow-up email. But there are so many studies that show that taking micro breaks and breaks throughout the day really does improve productivity. So if we can take breaks away from the screen, then that is good. We shouldn't have our eyeballs in a screen.
Well, that's the key bit. That's the key bit. Stephen, when you've been talking to people, has that been part of the problem sometimes, where people go, oh yeah, well, I do take breaks, but actually they're not taking a break. No. They're continuing to work. They are not actually taking a break from the work.
And I think we had, and I'm sort of referencing back to what we did on Monday, Victoria, but there was someone who raised that as a question, I think, was around the fact that how do I make people take breaks? How do I make people engage with the resources that have been put in front of them? And I think a lot of it is just, it's habit breaking, isn't it? I think it's breaking the habit of carrying on working during your break. But it's also a psychological thing of actually stopping. So it's some people's inability to switch off, isn't it? And I know I'm guilty of it, and I'm sure we'd all probably are guilty at some point, but it's those people who just cannot switch off, thinking if I carry on, I'm going to do more. But as Victoria said, actually, I'm going to do less, because as time goes on without a break, my productivity is just going to, drop off a cliff, as it were. So I think a lot of it is, like everything we talk around with DSE, a lot of it is habit breaking, or actually on the flip side, creating new habits, building those breaks in. And I'm quite interested, obviously, I think, is it this weekend the clocks change? Is it this weekend the clocks change?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, it just got me thinking there, we're going to start getting darker mornings and darker evenings. I wonder if studies have been done, and there'll be something out there that we can probably get our hands on as to, do people start taking less breaks when we get into the winter, when it's colder outside, So people may be going for that sort of 10:30, 2:30, 15-minute walk. I wonder if people have less breaks during the winter because the conditions outside, whether it's the temperature or the light or the dark, actually stops people from taking breaks. So are we entering a period where people are taking less breaks? Are they more happy to take breaks in the summer and the lighter days? But do they then, is it going to be hard for those people who don't want to take a break to have more excuses for not taking a break?
Well, I've just done some research, as you do.
I could see you tapping away. Go on.
Well, this is the great thing about these resources these days. You can do it. There's no research to show that that's necessarily true. I mean, what it does suggest is because of the different sort of daylight patterns, it tends to change slightly when people may start or finish work, and therefore people may decide to choose to work through during the day because they might come into work a bit later, say for example, or leave a bit earlier, so therefore they may decide to take breaks, but there's no evidence for it at the moment. That'd be a great study for somebody to do.
Yeah,
because you'd think it would have to. You think certainly in this country with the difference in temperature between summer and winter and the hours and the light, you'd think. I'm thinking people in offices. If it's a lovely June or July sort of morning or afternoon, they'll nip outside and do something. If they look out the window in November and December and go, it's about 3 degrees and it's chucking it down with rain. Actually, are they then going to take less ones? As you say, Graham, it'd be interesting to, and probably something I'll do after this is sort of dive into it a little bit more and see. Is it harder to make breaks stick during that sort of end of October, end of March, where we've got that clock change? Does that have an impact on the breaks that people either want to take or actually feel comfortable taking?
Yeah. Do you ever talk to people, Victoria, about how the brain works and cognition and things like that? Because I'm interested in that because. And here's another little story for you. So we used to have a software company just down the road from us here. It's now a cafe. But at the time, for about 20 odd years, it was a software company. And the guy that owned the software company, it actually became part of Norton, the antivirus company. But he had a tennis court outside. It's like an old manor building, and he had this tennis court outside. What he used to do is he used to force, probably couldn't do this these days, but he used to force his programmers to stop at a point in the day in teams and go outside and play tennis.
Okay.
Right. And but the way that he sold it, and I was always quite interested in this, the way he actually sold it to his programmers was that actually it was to do with cognition, because we actually, when we just sit and try and work things out, when we're working with one part of our brain, we get stuck. And the reason we get stuck is because we're not actually using the other side of our brain, the more creative side of our brain, which is also the part of our brain that has to do with things like spatial awareness and balance and all of those things. So playing tennis was really good, because when you start to think about having to hit a ball and staying upright and whatever, you stop using that part of the brain that you would sit and use to program code, and you use the other side of your brain. And his belief was that that's when the moments of genius would happen. That's when people would go, oh, do you know what? That thing that I've been trying to sort out all morning, it's just suddenly come to me. And it's because the two parts of the brain are working together. So I just wondered whether you've ever delved into that side of things with people.
Well, yeah, I mean, in my personal time, I think the human mind is a fascinating subject. And I think there's so much to be said for that. I feel like I get my most creative ideas when I think, oh gosh, I have to get up and take a break. I'm going to go for a walk. And actually then I start getting creative ideas. And I'm like, well, I couldn't do that at my desk because I was like confined in a way. So I think, we do need that change of environment to help, like, with inspiration and new ideas. And I think that that's really, really important. I remember I think it was my first job out of uni, and we had to give this big presentation, and the person I was giving presentation with, they were sweating and they were not happy. And I thought, right, okay, no, we're going to go grab the bat and ball that's in the back of my car, and we're going to go outside, and for the next half an hour, we can't do anything more on this presentation, but you're freaking out. And to be honest, like, I'm a bit nervous too. So we just went out on the field next to the car park and just hit a ball around for 20 minutes. And it was so good just for diffusing the tension. And like, we went in with these endorphins and a really positive attitude, instead of, you know, like with the stress of having to do like one of our like big first presentations. So I've had the experience of that sort of thing being really helpful as well.
Yeah, I just wonder whether we just need to really reframe the way that we sell doing nothing.
Yeah.
I really do feel like we need to, because as I say, I feel like the biggest problem is always this excuse like, yeah, but how are they going to meet their targets if we include breaks? How are they going to do that? And I feel like we almost need to say, do you know what? You're making people unproductive by pushing them to their cognitive limit, right? You're actually pushing the machine beyond its capability, and that's why it's not only why you're getting burnout, but you're getting idea burnout, cognition burnout very, very quickly. So effectively, you might have someone there. It's back to the presenteeism. You might have someone there, but they're not firing on all cylinders.
No,
right? So actually, give them time to do absolutely nothing, which might sound productive in terms of the business. What, I'm paying someone to sit there and do nothing? Yeah, but actually, you're not. You're paying for them to have ideas. You're paying for them to read, let whatever they've just learned or whatever soak in or whatever, so that actually it means more, or they come up with those ideas and they can come back into the room fresh with something else to say.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think I've noticed myself doing it personally, that sometimes when you have a job where you're going out to see customers a lot of the time, you can end up generally what my week used to look like would be Mondays and Fridays working from home, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday going out to see customers, do events, that sort of thing. I've started to make a conscious effort when I have got a day at home is to not fill it full of, say, Teams calls. So previously I'd go, I've got a day at home, I need to get 4 or 5 in throughout the day, I need to have it full. What I've tried to do is space them out, maybe do 2, but just give myself a little bit of breathing space to think, actually, just stop for a little bit, think about what am I doing, and let those ideas sort of foster and sort of build, where if you're too busy, that idea, you have it, and then you park it, and then you come back to it, and it just it loses its flow. So I know personally, I've started to try and create bigger gaps in my diary. And as you say, you look and go, well, actually on paper, you're doing less, but the reality is you're probably doing more because you're using that let's call it free time, a lot more effectively.
Yeah. I mean, high performance athletes literally have rest like scheduled in to their training programs, actual rest. And you think, well, they don't get better at sprinting for sprinting 24 hours a day. No, they have planned rest. And it's like, that actually is applicable in so many areas. That comes to business, that comes to so many different things. You can't just expect to keep going and going and going and to not experience any sort of burnout or any negative effects from it. We have to have rest. So yeah, it's important, and when you frame it like that, it does make more sense, doesn't it?
Well, we actually had on another podcast, we had a professional athlete the other day, and we were listening to the nutrition routine as well. I mean, there's another thing, and it's so strict, like literally has to know exactly what to eat at every single meal, and every single meal has to be at an exact time, and all of the nutrition elements of it have to be counted out, etc. And you just feel like, again, Stephen, you've been around offices, Victoria, you may have been around offices doing DSE. You go in there, you're looking at somebody that they may not be sitting correctly, their head's down, they're not sitting up, they're putting muscular skeletal strain on themselves, and then to the side of them, there's the 4 sausage rolls and the 6 donuts, which they're about to scoff for lunch, you know.
Yeah.
And so, so that's another big aspect of it, you know. These people don't perhaps sleep very well. They get highs of sugar intake, and then that dips, and then they get to the coffee, and then they start getting a headache, and then, you know, just the overall well-being side of things. All of these things have to come together, and you know, you can't separate them off. You know, sometimes I've been into offices to carry out workplace assessments, and you say, well, yeah, but so you know, your canteen's serving rubbish,
Yeah,
and everybody's eating. You know, you're not kind of monitoring what people are eating and whatever. And you say, well, however much good this might do in terms of improving their posture or actually getting them to walk a little bit more, or maybe taking on a little bit of fluid. The trouble is, if they're going to fill themselves with that, right, they're probably going to do themselves a lot of injury anyway, right? And all of the things kind of come together. So I never see any of these things in isolation.
No, I mean, we, as an example, you know, at our head office in the Netherlands, and I only go there sort of 3 or 4 times a year, but they've got a great routine. So everyone in the office, which could be anything between 5 and 15 people in at the same time, everyone eats lunch together. So everyone eats lunch together, but it's people don't bring their lunch in. It's provided. It's fresh salad, soups, etc., all healthy food. So it's 2 different things. It's sort of, enforcing is the wrong word. It makes sure people have a break. It makes sure people get away from their desk. It
and
ensures
socialize.
they socialize, they eat healthily. Some people will eat inside, some people will outside. Now, not every organization, I understand and appreciate, maybe has the budget or the ability to do that. But there are huge benefits by getting, you know, you're not finding, you know, junk food. You're not finding.
So you get the raw herring with the onion.
If we do, I ignore it, or you know, they know I don't like fish, so I avoid that. They probably do, but it's interesting, as I say, how just putting one thing in place, just almost for everyone, just brings in 4 or 5 really good habits on the back of that. And as you say, the DSE that we started off talking about is only one facet of the whole thing. There is a more holistic approach, and I know, Graham, we haven't done it for about 12 months, but your great story about the assessment with the lady in the McDonald's, I always think, to me, that sticks in my mind, and you're going to have to tell that again, but that sticks in my mind as a really great example of equipment plays a certain part, but habits and diet has a huge impact on all those other things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it was a cashier at a bank, Victoria, that I was asked to go and see, and several other assessors had already been in to see her, and they felt that it must be some kind of ergonomic situation, poor ergonomics going on, that was causing her to get really sleepy during the day and really struggle. But I couldn't really see anything there that was going to cause any kind of real effect. And she was really young. She was only 19 years old. Anyway, I decided to go throw a curveball and actually ask her a little bit more about herself and her and what she does throughout the whole day from start to finish, etc. And I discovered that she ate McDonald's 3 times a day.
That'll do it.
Yeah,
that'll do it. Yeah.
So anyway, so then we signposted her off dietary advice, etc. But you know, ultimately, you fill yourself with one particular kind of food substance. Nothing wrong with McDonald's, in moderation, like all things. But yeah, you fill yourself with one kind of diet type, etc. Too much salt, too much sugar, etc. And you know, you're going to crash, and then it can start to have other adverse reactions and effects, etc. That can impact concentration and other things like that. So often, when I went to assess somebody for DSE, it led to something else. And do you see that as well? That quite often the DSE side of things, which is a great starting point, unearths another layer.
Yeah, I mean, there are times where people's health conditions come into play. Like, for example, menopause can cause lots of different scenarios that you have to know when to signpost people, because at the end of the day, as a DSC assessor, I'm not a medical professional. I can ask questions, I can signpost, but like within like my remit is really like to meet the requirements of the regulation. Every single person has got free will, and the education piece is so important. So I suppose it's like getting the foundations all right, which is the ergonomics, and then the advice for obviously taking breaks and well-being. But sometimes I do find it hard to know when to give advice and when that's overstepping the mark, but especially if it's something to do with weight, some things can just either be a little ambiguous, or you wonder whether actually is it appropriate to bring this up, because actually what someone chooses to eat is completely up to them. You can give them guidance, but ultimately that's within their free will. We have no jurisdiction in that area.
Ultimately, I just felt, well, look, whatever it needed to ultimately solve the case.
Yeah.
You know, maybe I see myself as Conan Doyle when I'm out there. You know, I just want to, you know, the Sherlock Holmes of the office world. But I just think that it's down to the trust element. I think if you've won the trust of that person, and you're the one that's getting through, and you're the first person that's actually hearing the stories or whatever, then in some respect you have a duty of care to that person to signpost. That's what I would say, is that, you know, otherwise who do they go to? And I always saw it as that was the beautiful thing about doing ergonomic assessments, etc., or DSE assessments, was that you were potentially the foot in the door, the opportunity for that person to actually start to investigate what might be going wrong, because quite often there isn't another opportunity like that.
Oh, absolutely. And like, you know, there might be people who don't know that they like need an eye test and that they're entitled to one, and they're getting headaches. Are they drinking enough water? There are actually so many layers of advice that we give that is actually beyond like putting a piece of equipment in place. It will be like, make sure you're hydrated. And so yeah, the lifestyle plays a huge part in it. How much sleep someone's getting. Coffee.
Graham.
What's that?
Coffee, isn't it? Dehydrate you, won't it?
It's no, it's empty actually.
Right.
It's air. Air. I drink water as well. But you know, when you sit here all day long, it's coffee, tea. I tend to sort of like go in a circle: coffee, tea, water. Coffee, tea, water, and that's the you know, that's the way it goes round. And I switched from, I start at caffeine in the morning and then I switch to decaf.
Sensible.
Yeah.
Well,
as soon as years ago it would have been 8. When I was doing DSE assessments, it would have been about 8 strong coffees throughout the day. Well, here's the other thing. When people are doing DSE assessments, it's a bit like I said the other day about people that provide seating, specialist seating into companies where they all end up with bad backs because they're carrying heavy chairs. When you're doing DSE assessments, you're having to do long hours out on the road and then lots of assessment reports or whatever. You have to keep going. And you have to spend most of your time in coffee shops writing those reports. And therefore, you drink lots of coffee. It's not great for your health. So, folks, if you haven't got someone in to do your DSE assessments yet, just consider the fact that when you do, they're putting their life at risk for you. You know,
very valiant.
Yes.
So you know, when you're paying people like Victoria to do it, she's putting her life on the line for you, so that your health will be better. So you know, feel good about it.
Yeah, Victoria, with your experience of doing assessments, what sort of are there a couple that sort of stick out in your mind as sort of ones that were really challenging that you overcame, or what and you know, ones that were really rewarding? Anything that sort of springs to mind that sort of gives you that sort of great job satisfaction where you sort of bit like Graham in his McDonald's situation. There was an issue, you had to do a bit of investigating, it wasn't straightforward, and it was great to get a result at the end of it.
I don't do a lot of assessments these days, but I think there's one that stands out. We gave our online training assessment solution to a big organization. They were in charge of managing it, and they sent it to someone who has MS, and they were in bed. They don't have a standard setup, and they emailed and said, I don't know if I can use this. And I remember just being like, oh my goodness, like I actually never want that to happen again. Like, how obnoxious to be asked questions about this type of work setup when it doesn't apply to you. So we've managed to put into our training course an option for people to check out if it doesn't align with them. But one of our assessors, Joanne, met with him, and she just said that he was so delightful, and the company was like really invested in providing him all the proper support. So that was really heartwarming, because he faced a lot of adversity from like his condition, but like he was still able to be supported so well by this organization to make sure that he was working in line with like his own like parameters that weren't really defined by a normal DSC setup. So I think that was like maybe one of my favorite ones, because he sent a really lovely email like giving a big thank you. So yeah, I think that was probably like my favorite one.
I can imagine. I actually had the MS Society's assessment contract for 2 years. So I did a lot of work with the MS Society. For me, I feel like there's any of the conditions that center around sort of like muscle wastage, fatigue, things like that. So chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, all of those syndromes, I feel like they are potentially under DSE some of the most problematic, and I feel like they are some of the ones that are most problematic for managers to understand what they should do and deal with. Because when somebody's experiencing pain, but they can't necessarily explain why that pain's there. I mean, it's if someone's got a bad wrist or a bad back, and it's pinpointed to a particular area and a particular physical thing that's happened, like, a slip disc or whatever, you can see it on an X-ray, why it's happening. You can kind of then understand what you need to do in order to support the body to stop that pain from happening, or to lessen the pain. When someone's experiencing pain, and it's physiological, but it's also a little bit psychosomatic as well, it's really difficult. It's really difficult. And it doesn't, one of the things I would say into that, though, is where the area of adjustability and flexibility and all of those things comes in better than anything, right? Where not necessarily having the body in one place, etc., for any length of time. And thank the Lord, that is why we've gone away from all of this advice about you need to sit at right angles and you need to do this and you need to do that, because ultimately a lot of that advice that was given early on for those people in particular has caused so much pain and so many problems. It's so much better to quite often I found one of the things that worked so well, especially for people with things like fibromyalgia, was to sit them on something that constantly moved to reduce pressure point pain.
Advice that you go back to the very start that was given was just so intuitive and counterproductive, wasn't it? Really, it's interesting how that was what was given, but actually when you look at it and go, why was that given?
Well, I'll tell you what it was. It was misread. Yes. It was misunderstood. Right. I had long conversations with some people early on about why that information came down, and it was, the trouble is when we try and info sheet any kind of solution in the world, and especially in business, there's a tendency for people to take that and go, that means this. And in the simplification of it, they miss the actual meaning behind it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that whole sitting at right angles thing was to do with the reference posture that came out of HSE guidelines, which were put in there to do with measuring yourself against furniture so that you knew whether or not you actually fitted the furniture, right?
Literally sitting in that position.
Yeah, nobody should have been suggesting that literally sitting at right angles all day long was a great idea, because sitting in any position all day long is going to cause muscle fatigue, etc. So, fortunately, we began to kind of unwind some of our own information and actually understood that the body needs to move, and like the discs in the back will get fed with oxygen if they're actually opening and contracting, etc. And blood flow is important for for a lot of different things. Oxygen intake is important as well. So we and I feel like we part of the problem is, I think, that we did a lot of damage over in the UK as well. I'm going to say that. I feel like that we were particularly prevalent to that, because actually all that time, if you looked at some of the philosophies that were coming out of places like Holland and Finland and the Nordics and whatever, where they were constantly talking about movement, and people like Stocker that became Varia, etc., were all about constant movement, etc. We kind of took some of that, but we went, but we want to give a regulation for, it's very kind of 1940s army, isn't it? When you watch those old black and white films, right? Everybody is wearing regulation. It was all that again, and I think we kind of followed a kind of regulatory line for too long without saying, use a bit of common sense in here as well,
Just referencing back to what we did, the conversation Victoria and I and some others had on Monday, what I thought was really interesting, and I should have maybe brought this up earlier, was you were talking about movement there, and that's what sort of sprung the memory off, was sit-stand desks. There was a lot of conversations around that. There was a lot of people, and it goes back a little bit to what we're saying about habit. A number of people on that session, Victoria, referenced, how do I get people to use them more? And that was one of the interesting things, and it just ties in with what we're saying about what people are told. People were just a bit reluctant to actually use them, and they weren't sure, and they were using them as standing desks. And it was really interesting, you say about interpretation, Graham, about this great equipment that people have got invested in, but actually using it and breaking those habits is still really, 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 really tricky. And people were doing a little bit to, how do I get people to use them? It was...
it's true.
I'll give a little bit into that. I feel like the best way to get people to use sit, stand, move solutions. We should always put the move in there. The best way to put sit, stand, move solutions in and get people to use them is we need to start changing culture, but we need to start changing culture at school level, right? And that's where the problem lies, because we get school children to sit to learn. So we get school children to sit to do any kind of cognition work. And that then filters over into the workplace, right? When you start breaking down tasks and how people feel comfortable doing tasks, there are some people, right, because they've retrained their brain or because they're naturally inclined thinking-wise to do that, who are quite happily can be task-focused, etc., standing up or sitting down. In fact, some will prefer standing up. But the majority of us still will find it easier to, in inverted commas, concentrate when we're sat down. And that comes through a learned behavior that we get in school. So if we started children standing up a bit more in school and learning standing up, we'd get out of that habit.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Prove me wrong.
Yeah. What about you, Victoria? Do you find there's certain tasks in terms of you find better sitting, or the ones you do standing? What sort of habits do you, or what do you do to break your and change your working cycle? How do you sort of bring movement into your working day?
Yeah, that's really, really interesting, because I definitely know if I've got if I've got something complicated to do, if I've got to concentrate, I will lower my desk, I will sit down, and I will focus. If I've got things, I think I was saying at the beginning, that are a little bit like lighter, I'll walk. If I need a bit more concentration, I'll stand. But I really do listen to my body, because I think that I feel like we are kind of indoctrinated at school in that sense to overwrite even if you're hungry, finish your plate of food, or I feel like these habits just are constantly built up on top of each other. So actually we don't know what our bodies are saying anymore. We don't know when we're hungry. We don't know when to move. We don't know when to sleep, because we're not encouraged to take naps if we're tired, or I feel like we're so far removed from knowing what we need, that we need to take time to actually get in sync with our body and listen to our cues, because toddlers can do it really well. So I think that there probably is a retraining thing that we need to do to make sure that we are noticing if we're sitting too long without needing a timer to go off, and have that a bit more organically, because there are so many systems in our body that do rely on movement. As you were saying, our lymphatic system doesn't have its own pump. It relies on the contraction of muscles. So if we're sat down all day, we're going to get very stagnated, and it's not going to be good for us, because our lymphatic system is responsible for draining. So I think that we need to get better at listening to our bodies and stop just following these regulations. You're right, everything is so structured, and I think in Britain we're particularly susceptible to needing boxes and rules and do this, then that, and everything needs to fit in a very specific cookie cutter shape. But that's not the reality of life, and especially being biological human beings, it's definitely not the case, and every single person's different.
Well, that kind of leads me on to a final kind of point today, which is in the whole field of adjustments, I feel like one of the big problems is, again, time. I don't feel like when we give people adjustments, I don't feel, we train them enough in those adjustments, but also I don't feel like we give them enough time to adjust. The word is adjustments, right? But the thing is that that word adjustment shouldn't just sit around the thing that we're putting in place, the solution that we're putting in place, or the bit of kit that we're putting in place. It should be around the person as well. That person needs to adjust in the way that they work, right? But I feel like one of the problems is we go, okay, so and you've probably heard this, Stephen. So if we give them that will sort it then.
Not quite.
So that person's still going to need to learn how to use that within the way that they work, right? And that may actually slow down their productivity to begin with before it gets faster, right? And that's problematic for business, isn't it? Because that means they're going to do less work, right? But we're going to have to give them that time. Again, here's another good case. I remember going to see somebody who had literally burnt out their right hand.
Okay.
From a medical point of view, so they were doing a lot of financial input. They were using a numeric keypad, all day long, entering numbers, and this hand had now got a medical condition where they could not use it, and they've been told by the doctor, no way are you using that for 6 months, right?
Okay.
So I said to them, use your left hand, and they were like, don't be silly, I can't do that with my left hand. I said, well, we'll give you, it was actually a bit of kit, we'll give you a bit of kit, you go on the left hand side, you're going to start to try and do that. It will be slow. Right? It took them about a month,
okay,
to get up to the same speed with their left hand. right? They had no choice.
Yeah.
But that shows you, right? You can actually do it a different way, but you have to learn how to do it a different way. The great example of that I always remember was Nick Faldo. Steve,
Yeah.
know who Nick Faldo is. Nick Faldo was a great golf player who had to learn to redo his swing.
Yeah.
He had to completely redo his swing. So, I mean, you imagine you're winning golf tournaments around the world and whatever. You've got a particular swing. You can't use that swing anymore. It was an injury, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he became very, very tunnel vision. But I think, he was basically, his thought process was, I've got to go backwards to go forwards.
He has to go. Yeah, he knew that actually he could only. That was
he'd gone as far as he could with what he was doing. If he wanted to get better, he couldn't just keep doing what he was doing. He needed to go and start.
So he had to relearn how to play golf again, right? Top of the game, he's got to relearn how to play golf. But he did. And
he got better.
And he got better.
And he got.
So there you go. I mean, so ultimately, I think we've got to challenge ourselves a little bit sometimes as well, and go, do you know what, we can use both hands?
Yeah.
Right. How many people do that at a computer? If they're using a mouse with their right hand all day long, and they're starting to get a bit of, carpal tunnel, or a bit of, other type of tendonitis in the hand or whatever, how many of them go, oh, do you know what? I might try using one with my left hand. Might be slower, but I could do an hour a day with it on my left and give this a break for an hour. It's so simple, but it makes all the difference. So there you go. That's one thing I would say. Have you seen that yourself, Victoria? You seen that people like perhaps just not giving themselves enough time to make those proper adjustments?
Yeah, I think that probably is quite typical. You're right. People don't want to implement something that's going to, I guess the long-term reward sometimes isn't appealing to people if it means a bit of a sacrifice at the beginning. I think it's really about education. I think that we've got so used to wanting things now. I think there's like a massive, everything happens so instantly. Everyone's, chasing dopamine because it's so freely and readily available. I think that does slip into a lot of our habits. But yeah, I think, the reasonable adjustments that will benefit you in the long term, I think are really, really important to implement. It is worth it in the long run.
Thank you for coming in today.
Short-term pain, long-term gain. That's all these things we spoke about, whether it's adjusting your workplace or adjusting how you play sport. You've got to accept, and businesses have to accept, something might go backwards for a short period of time, but if it accelerates you forwards, it's worth doing it.
Like a catapult.
Yeah. There you go. Backwards to go forwards. Yeah,
it reminds me of a song by a band who I can't mention, who were fronted by Chris Connolly, who I got to interview one time, and but they had this song that went, "No pain, baby, no gain," and absolutely right. It's absolutely right. So you could just go and remember that today, folks. No pain, no gain.
No gain.
There you are. Get it on a T-shirt, put it around your office, and then everybody will know that you just need to give people a little bit more time, a bit more time for breaks as well. Actually give them breaks, and do your DSE, your display screen equipment. If you don't even know that you're meant to be doing it, you better give Victoria a call. She'll give you the lowdown on what could happen if you get caught not doing it. It's just not worth thinking about. No. Father Christmas certainly wouldn't come. That's true. I've heard that. It's a rumor, maybe, but it could be true. Thank you, Victoria, for coming today. Thank you for joining us for this conversation. As ever, thank you, Stephen,
and thank you, Graham, as ever.
And thank you, folks, for listening and taking part in this conversation. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today and you think that there's somebody in your office who frankly should know this stuff and doesn't, do share this conversation with them. tell them actually it wasn't that bad to listen to either. You know, there's a lot worse you could listen to in 50 minutes. And if it has been useful to you and you do need to contact any of us, basically you can find everybody here on LinkedIn. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another one of these. But until then, from Victoria, Stephen, and myself, bye for now.
Goodbye.
Bye.